Many thanks for staying with us and welcome back to the morning show here on Rise News. Now, Nigeria has more than 20 million out-of-school children. Why is the problem being allowed to get to endemic levels by the authorities? One could say what could be the worst-case scenario if nothing is consciously and deliberately done about it now. How does Nigeria measure in this respect with her contemporaries in Africa and other developing nations? How can the situation be made to fit into the education agenda of the next government in Nigeria? Well, in search of answers, let's now turn to our guest, Professor Adeniyi of Bayes University and Otibe Henshaw of Education Partnership Center. Welcome to the show. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, good morning. It's good to have you both here. Professor Adeniyi, it's good to see you again. Well, when we talk out-of-school children, what exactly do we refer to here definitionally? We want to establish distinctively that these kids are not away from school out of their own will or volition. Talk us through what exactly that term means, out-of-school kids. And anyone can take this way. Let's start with Adeniyi.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's a very straightforward thing, and it's just saying that these are kids, these are children who are supposed to be in school, but who don't have the opportunity, to be admitted into schools or to be encouraged into schools, because of the system that we are in. People whose rights to be educated are being denied on account of parental or leadership failure. And because of what we can attribute to be, the increasing population explosion, the explosion in our population that we are witnessing on a daily basis, and which seems not to be addressed, by the rightful authorities. And when we are witnessing an increase in population, we should expect that it will rub off on facilities, utilities, services that citizens are supposed to benefit from. And this is happening in the face of limited resources. And because of limited resources, maybe leadership, government, and governance, have appeared to be incapacitated to tend to a critical section of the population, represented in children, in kids, that are just being brought to the world, not of their own volition, but because of the desires of parents, as the case could be. So out of two children, unfortunately, are those who have been deprived of their rights to be educated, the privilege of education. And we know the importance of education in terms for the generation of human capital in the future, for the construction of salutary minds, for the fertilization of civilized minds, which can be helpful to the building of a healthy society. And when children are not educated, we know the implication. Of course, you are asking them to resort to self-help, and self-help might include criminality that might eventually disrupt the flow of society, and of course, the question of growth and development will be impeded. So it's an unfortunate situation that we are in. It's unfortunate that the number, rather than decreasing, is increasing. And of course, it's asking us, to make hay while the sun shines, so that oftentimes we have attributed the rise of criminality, particularly terrorism, banditry, and kidnapping, to the fact that people have minds, that we have an increasing number of people with deprived and depraved minds that are nihilistic, minds that are hopeless, minds that think that there's no price, there's no reason to exist. And when you have such minds, of course, you cannot feel safe in the system. If you look around our cities, there's a question of the marginality of comfort. Only very few places will you say that people are comfortable. A lot of the cities, are filled with jobless people hanging around, just looking for what to do. Their next meal, go to the city, go to Kano, Abuja, even Abuja, the celebrated Abuja. What about Lagos? All these people are just hanging around, looking for what to do because of our relative planlessness. So we need to. It's something that we need to think about going forward. And how do we think about it? Conscientious effort to have a rightful population policy, to encourage people to be ready to procreate, to bring children to the world, children that they can probably take care of. Nobody is saying that. Nobody is trying to control how many children you can bring to the world, but just make sure that you can take care of them. And if you cannot take care of them, what it means is that you are leaving the burden to the state, and the state is becoming overwhelmed because of limited resources. And of course, this is rubbing off on our ability to achieve peace, on our ability to ensure growth and development. Yeah, overall, it's an unfortunate situation that has to be dealt with, and it should be a priority by the next administration, as the case could be Abiy and Aaron.
All right, so let's turn our attention to Utibe right now. Now, the stats and collated data have revealed that on a global scale, India, Pakistan and Nigeria have recorded the highest figures of out-of-school children. But what's more alarming is the case of Nigeria is the percentage of these children that are female, about 60%. Could you speak to some of the circumstances surrounding this and, of course, in its long-term implication if this is not curbed?
Absolutely. I think the first thing to recognize is that the situation with out-of-school children in Nigeria has always been a state of emergency. And so it's less focused on the numbers, but more on what can we do to stop this situation in its tracks. So with the pandemic that occurred, where we had all of the world's children, shut out from school, what happened is that as we returned back to normal activities, a lot of the most vulnerable children, the most vulnerable groups who should be in school are the ones that would eventually not return back to school. And we know some of this, contextually in the regions that we work in. Then we also know that a second factor is that those who spend in Nigeria in school are typically learning very little. And so even though parents are poor or they're uneducated themselves, they're still logical. It's like the proverbial jumbo. I sent you to school. You don't know how to spell your name. So the question becomes, what is the value? After 6 years of schooling, 9 years of schooling, in some cases, some children are still unable to read a grade 2 text, a grade 2 literacy text. And so that's what contributes to more and more children, particularly female children, like you've pointed out, staying out of school, because when they're out of school, they have more economic value, to their families. And so those are the things that we need to begin to consider to own the problems particularly and focus less on the numbers and say, how do we make sure that children who are in school are safe and are learning, right? Because we've also seen the challenges with insecurity, again, with focus on the female child, because that's where we've seen a lot of abductions and disruptions to education due to challenges with security, while they are in school. School should be a safe place. And so far, we are still struggling with that, in our country, particularly in the most vulnerable areas. And then, like I've also mentioned, the fact that children spend time in our public schools in particular and learn very little. And so we need to begin to strengthen our curriculum and the way it is delivered in a way that ensures that when children go to school, there is immediate value for education. When children spend time in school, their skills, their knowledge, and their competencies immediately improve, and it also improves the quality of their lives. As to what will happen if we do not arrest this situation, I think that Professor Adeniyi alluded to this. Education is critical to any kind of national growth and development. Your human capital is the foundation for any kind of development. So if we want to avoid, insecurity, because we're already seeing some of the effects of letting a critical mass of your population go unskilled, unlearned, without the ability to take care of themselves. And so if we want to avoid the kind of situations that we've seen recently with militancy and terrorism, and we want to avoid that in the next 10, 20 years, then education needs to be our topmost priority. And also, not just, everybody says that, the government cannot do it alone. And I agree, we all have a part to play, from the media to the private sector, even to individuals. However, we also have to make education a key national issue, a voting agenda, something that people go to the polls and vote about, so that the government's responsibility cannot be delegated, unfortunately, because they are the single institution with the capacity to solve some of these challenges at scale.
All right, very disheartening stats, of course, there in terms of the numbers and the data that we have there. But let's talk more about some more sustainable solutions in the long term. As we've established, conflict-prone areas such as northeastern Nigeria have contributed to a precarious learning environment, especially over the last few years. What would you say is some of the most effective measures to revive a trust in returning to the classrooms again? And alternatively, what role will the future of online learning perhaps play in this regard? Professor Adeniyi, please.
Yes, thanks, Abby. I'm aware that there have been some interventionist measures by some multilateral non-governmental organizations and some civil society organizations, in the past to provide some temporary form of learning, for children who have been displaced in crisis war-torn areas, particularly the Northeast. I do not know the extent to which this one has gone, but I know UNICEF and some other organizations have been have been on the front lines. They have had a head start in providing some interventionist educational services for displaced children. But that's just temporary. That may not have the ability to go too far, really. I think there are some short and long-term measures that can be taken, really. First, we need to look at our culture, our religion, that has to do to encourage, in some instances, endless or maybe endless production of children, in the guise of trusting in the ability of an omnipotent to provide for those children. Perhaps we should become a much more empirical, much more existential in our ability to reason. And of course, a lot will be at the doorstep of government in this regard to provide some form of education, some form of enlightenment for the populace, such that that certain things are actually in your hands and you do not have to put everything at the doorsteps of the Almighty. Yes, the state is there to help you, but before the state can help you, you also have a role to play so that the government that is, will have the ability to help you. You're also part of the government. So we need some concerted, conscientization process, for people to begin to rethink their acts. Our population is growing, the resources are limited, and if we're not taking action, of course, the future may not be too pleasant for us all. Secondly, of course, we have made this point severally, that we are falling far short of UNESCO expectation of what our educational budget should be on an annual basis. I think the very last speaker, Mr. Patrick Obahiagbon alluded to this, where we have less than 10% of the nation's population being going into the nation's budget going into education. That's really not the right way to go. We should try as much as possible to up it, considering that even countries in the West African sub-region, in some other African countries, have much more percentage than we are presently doing. We need to be conscious of that fact, knowing the importance of education in the generation of human capacity. Like I said earlier, so the structures need to be increased, Then, of course, perhaps when we have structures, when we have the facilities, practical physical utilities, then we can begin to emphasize the question of dumping down, like my colleague in Lagos mentioned earlier on. Quality will also begin to come in, when we have the facilities and the utilities in the first instance. But of course, all of them will have to go hand in hand. It's a conscious effort, and I don't think it's something that is beyond us to do. So our culture, our religions, have to be addressed. Then, of course, we need enlightenment. We need maybe some kind of education literacy, so people can be reorientated, to take things into their hands and not push it to the other. And the other person in the circumstance is the government. And like I said earlier, it's okay if you think you want to have as many children as possible in a situation where government does not have a definite population policy or number of children to have. It's okay for you to think like that, but just make sure that you're able to take care of these children so that it will not become a problem for the society. And maybe we should also underscore the fact that there's probably nothing wrong in having increased population. We have seen it across the world, in China, for instance, and in India, where increased population has been turned into advantage, has been turned into labor force, has been turned into a huge market, for production, leading to explosion in their economies, leading to the rise of these countries as technological giants. Then nothing is saying that our population cannot continue to increase. But if we have to increase it, if we have to continue to increase it without control, without measuring, then of course we should be mindful of the limited resources that we have. Do we have enough resources to cope with it? Do we have enough policy formulations, that will guide our policy direction in our ability to make sure that, we do not have a wasteful, wasted, idle population that will turn around to harm the rest of the society. Remember, I said that the bulk of Nigerians still live in abject poverty. And even in the celebrated cities that we keep talking about, in Lagos, in Port Harcourt, in Abuja, in Kano, in Kaduna, how many people are living, are having an above or average life, not even above average in circumstance? How many people, how many households live an average life? The majority of people are still struggling. And when you have people struggling like that, of course, at some point they may resort to self-help. And self-help means, taking to criminality, even though we are not justifying this. But we're just saying that government has a higher responsibility. Leadership has a higher responsibility in the matrix. And this should form one of the major things that whoever is going to take over from President Muhammad Buhari will have to consider from 2023.
Professor Adeniyi, Yes. I just want to quickly touch on something that I think you probably have left out, because Utibe mentioned we just want to address for conflict-prone areas, which, of course, that's a major deterrent for kids even being in the classrooms. What are the merits of online learning? Is there a place for it? Is there an infrastructure for it? And what are some of the limitations for it? And we can get feedback from both you and Utibe on this, please.
Thank you very much. I missed that aspect of your question. Very important question. Online learning, it's in tandem with the new age that we are in, the 21st century, where we are going to virtual, where life is largely being living, where we are living life online rather than offline. It has implications, no doubt. Sections of Nigerian institutions are adopting it. Mine has adopted it a long time ago, but it has its own limitations as well. And one of these is we are a country where we are still dealing with question of power. Power is still a problem for us. Oftentimes, we hear controversy around the places on why there's darkness. We are still to resolve this. And do not forget that online learning is reliant on machines. Machines is powered, of course, by electricity to a very large extent. So that's one aspect of it which is going to be a challenge. And the second aspect of it is, of course, the provision of facilities. How many citizens, those who are supposed to be beneficiaries, can afford smartphones, can afford laptop computers. In some other sections of the world, by the time they go into primary school, they are given computers, even free of charge. Are we doing this? Are we able to do this? Where are the facilities going to come from? Then what about, yes, computers can largely be user-friendly, but what's the guarantee that a section of our population, are going to be exposed or be able to imbibe the prescriptions of computing? And of course, that's what my colleague in Lagos also said a while ago, about the quality of learning. What's the quality of learning? How easy will it be for them to understand how to manipulate it? Simply logging on can still be probably problematic to some people. So we have to consider all these measures, irrespective of the effectivity of online learning. Yes, it is easier. You can do it from long distances. It can be very convenient. But of course, do not forget, fundamental to it is also the fact that some kind of learning may not be efficient without physical contact. It's not everything that you can actually do online. Do not forget the fact of precept is very important. The fact of showing examples, having some kind of presence, physical presence, it can be helpful to internalization of things taught, and that may be another downside. So online learning should not be a major alternative. It could just simply be a complement, but not an effective solution to physical learning. physical learning is still a priority anywhere in the world. Even in modern institutions, universities, and institutions that are lower, yes, they can arrange online learning for you, but at some point you need to establish some physical presence, to consolidate what you've been told online, or to be assured that they haven't been talking to animals, they haven't been talking to people other than yourself. We're in a creative world where even dogs can be taught on how to use computers. They want to be assured that they haven't been talking to dogs, that you are the person. And of course, that requires some kind of engagement, some kind of cross-fertilization of ideas to be sure that you have actually imbibed what you have been taught over the years. So online learning can simply be complementary, cannot be a complete alternative, to learning, as the case could be.
All right, Utibe, permit me to now try to bring this to a contemporary state, looking at how education is not as romantic as it used to be. Previously, a lot of people were sold on the fact that the ticket out of poverty, penury, and lack is education. People have seen that there are other alternative sources of probably moving from one cadre to the other without education. And these days, no thanks to social media, TikTok, Instagram, where people go around brandishing the word education is scam. How do we sell to the young ones coming up right now that education is still the bedrock for building any great society, that you cannot escape that? Talk to us about this.
Thank you so much for that question. I think I will start by answering Abby's initial question, and by saying that I think a more sustainable alternative to online learning is to explore and scale low-tech solutions. So low technology solutions allows for those who have barriers to more advanced technology like online, like Professor Adeniyi has illustrated. So in our organization, we implemented a low-tech SMS delivery project where we delivered curriculum content to parents and caregivers through SMSs on their phone. Feature phones and mobile phones have deeply penetrated the Nigerian population and context. Everyone has one. And we're able to deliver these SMSs complemented by learning material, workbooks, and teaching material for the parents to be able to support their children's learning at home. And so community-driven and low-tech solutions like these are the things we need to explore if we want to ensure that all our children are learning. And to your question, Aaron, I think that if education delivers its promises, which is that you get an education, you get the skills and the competencies to engage in the world and fend for yourself, I think it will be self-promoting. At the end of the day, everybody is trying to self-actualize. They want to meet their needs and they want to make something of themselves. However, not everybody has equal access to be able to do these things. Not everybody has the same ability. And that's what the education system is supposed to deliver that equal platform, to deliver that equalizer, to deliver the skills that everyone can then now take into the world, into the marketplace, and make something of themselves. So at the end of the day, it really is about delivering the promise of education. Like you say, at one point in time, it used to be taken for granted that you get an education and you become a better person in life. But I think what we've seen is that over the years, slowly but surely, our education system has failed in delivering those skills. So you have a child, it's like the example I used of John Bull, earlier. John Bull has been is unable to read a simple paragraph. He cannot help his parents at home with the skills that he's supposed to be learning at school. So gradually, slowly but surely, John Bull begins to seek alternatives to making something of himself. So,
all right, Utibe. Okay, it appears that we might be having some technical difficulties with Utibe then.
I think we are.
But of course, very pertinent question you've got there. Let's see if we still have Professor Adeniyi, if you can hear us clearly.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
All right, Professor Adeniyi?
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
We can hear you.
I can hear you.
All right. So, of course, it's a very pertinent question that Utebe is responding to here that Aaron had posed in terms of a very almost lackadaisical attitude towards the concept of education. And now this could also be further buttressed by the ongoing situation within Nigeria's academic and educational system, as we were discussing much earlier about the ASU strike that's been going on for quite a number of months, which is extremely costly for the future of this country. Let's talk a bit more about that. Do you believe that some of the existing structures, even within the country, is lending itself towards this apathy, let's put it that way, towards education?
I want to believe, I heard you very correctly, I want to believe that there's still much, there's still more that we can do, as a people, and the government can still do a lot to improve the quality and quantity of education, much more than we presently have, If you go to the average Nigerian public institution, you'll marvel at how derelict the facilities are, how dilapidating, the structures are. And of course, this will even strike you more if you compare it to what is obtainable or what is presently in evidence in private institutions that are trying to do their best in terms of the provision of these facilities and infrastructures. And of course, it will even become worse if you look at the quality that is on offer in some foreign countries. And of course, it's often very difficult to agree that the problem is lack of funds when it comes to education. Because sometimes you see government intervening in other sectors. They intervene, spending trillions of naira, sometimes billions as well. And if they are making this kind of intervention, then why can't they make this intervention in public institutions, public educational institutions, that is? So you just see that it's a matter of priority, and it's very, very regrettable. At the end of the day, it will affect the content, the quality of products coming out of these universities. And of course, every day is reflected in the quality of research that is being produced. Oftentimes, questions are asked around the quality of our researches. How many times have we made how many times have we been able to make any groundbreaking research in our institutions? And of course, this is not the fault of the personnel, it's not the fault of the human resources, it's just because the environment is not right. Education, learning thrives better when the environment is right, when there are utilities, when there are facilities, and of course, when you have when you're in a good state of mind, when your mind is at rest, your mind is not necessarily afraid of security, you are not thinking about being kidnapped the next moment, because research learning can be very, very painstaking. It's an intangible thing that happens in a process. It is processual, and it needs, rest of mind, a kind of ordered course, not something that will be interrupted at times that you do not expect.
Understood.
So those are still our bane that we can probably do.
Understood. Thank you, Professor Adeniyi. But now that we've got Utebe back, we're not going to wrap this up without talking through some of the activities of the Education Partnership Center in relation to the reality Nigeria has on ground education-wise. If you could please talk us through that very briefly, please, Utebe.
Thank you very much. I think one key thing that we have done is...
Is that for me?
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you, Utebe.
Yeah, I think okay. So with the Education Partnership Center, we designed and implemented a citizen-led household assessment of learning. And it's a survey that allows us to go into communities and households and meet children where they are, regardless of whether they're in school or out of school, and to assess their fundamental literacy and numeracy competencies. And so in 2017, we went to 21,600 households across 6 states in the country and surveyed 49,000 children, all within the schooling age of age 5 to 15. And we've discovered the abilities. We were able to collect data on the fundamental literacy and numeracy competencies of children, which is the biggest indicator of learning, really, because all other further advanced types of learning depends on the child's ability to read and understand, and also to be numerate, to be able to do basic arithmetic problems, to solve basic arithmetic problems. And building on that data, we have then begun to design interventions to plug the gaps that we have observed in specific communities. For instance, I gave the example of the low-tech program that we implemented in Kano State. It was called Zo Mukoyatare, which simply means come, let us learn. And we delivered curriculum content, learning content to parents and caregivers through their mobile phones, sending SMSs at specific times of the day, having surveyed those households and distributed workbooks and teaching materials that parents could then use to support their children's learning at home. And we did this, of course, in the wake of the pandemic, where all children were shut down from school, but not all shut out from school, but not all children had access to online learning. And so this type of data is so fundamental for the education sector. And we're taking that a step further and doing a lot of advocacy, encouraging both public and non-state actors to continue to collect relevant data on our children's competencies. Because at the end of the day, it's about what children can do, not how much time they are spending in a classroom or out of the classroom, but what they are able to do. What are they able to read? What are they able to understand? So we collect that data and in turn use that data to design some type of action. So that's one or two examples of what our organization does when it comes to basic education and supporting children's learning in school.
All right.
And out of school.
Professor Adeniyi, let's give you 60 seconds to just tie this whole discussion up.
Well, I believe that we are making progress by recognizing that we have a problem in our hands, that we have out of school children that shouldn't be, a higher number that shouldn't be. So cognizance of that, a recognition of that, is a step towards finding solutions. And what are the solutions? There are short and long-term measures that we have collectively agreed upon, immediate arrangement, through some kind of interventions beyond the provisions, beyond the offers that we are getting from multilateral organizations. And of course, government should also come in with some intervention funds, to address it, making it a priority, realizing that, the children are our future. And of course, education is not necessarily a privilege, it should be a right, because of the impact, the importance it has, to the growth and development of any system. It has been emphasized across the world, and our own country shouldn't be different. Education is liberating. Education amounts to civilization. Education is helpful eventually to the reduction of crime and criminality in the societies, so that that's when people begin to appreciate life more and do not necessarily have to be nihilistic. The value existent, they have hope, trusting that even if the present is not good enough, the future can still be better.
I want to say thank you very much
the ball is back in our court.
The panel today for your time on Newsday, to Professor Adeniyi and Henshaw for your time speaking on education here in Nigeria. It's now time for a short break here on The Morning Show. When we return, we'll be reviewing top stories in today's newspapers. Stay with us.